Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Catalyst Wedding Review podcast. I'm your host, Jen Samako, and I'm CEO and Creative Director of Catalyst Wedding Co. Catalyst is a print and online wedding publication dedicated to changing the conversation around weddings, from over-the-top consumerism and purely hetero love affairs to expressions of love and commitment that can truly be shared by everyone. Each week on this podcast, we'll be looking at the role that pop culture plays and how we think about weddings. And this week, we will be reviewing the 2010 movie starring Kristen Bell called When in Rome. And spoiler alert, we will be discussing the plot details of this movie. So if you don't want to know what happens, then you should hit pause on this podcast right now and come back to it after you've watched the movie. But honestly, you will probably enjoy it just as much if you listen to the podcast and find out what happens from us. So as always, I ask my guests to pick which movie they want to review. And When in Rome was selected by none other than photographer Liv Lyszyk.
Hey!
Hi! So Liv is a 20-something wedding photographer who specializes in diverse and madly in love couples. She is based in West Michigan, but travels often for weddings. She's obsessed with floral patterns, over-caffeinating, and binging The Office on Netflix. So welcome, Liv.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So tell me, why did you pick this movie, When in Rome?
Okay, so it's a little obscure, and I know that most people probably haven't heard of it, but I was in high school when this movie came out, so if you can do the math, you can kind of figure out how old I am. But I went and saw this with my mom, and for some reason, just her life as an art curator and just jetting off to Italy just really intrigued me. And kind of was the start to me thinking about being able to have art as a career. I had never really seen many movies that made it look so exciting and just had all of the Hollywood glitz and glam of living in New York and being an art curator and all that stuff. So it really got me interested, and the wedding part was kind of to the side at first, but I still really enjoyed that aspect of it. But yeah, it really kind of introduced me to people that have real life art jobs, which I hadn't really realized at that point yet. So yeah.
Yeah, so Kristen Bell's character in this movie is named Beth Martin, and her job is as a event coordinator and curator for exhibits at the Guggenheim, which frankly, I'm like, how did she get that job?
Yeah, they don't really talk about, I was really interested in how she got, like you said, how she got the job. And after seeing it, I did a lot of research, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be an art historian. Then I can plan these events and all this stuff. And then fast forward a couple years, and I realized how unrealistic that is. And you pretty much have to wait for someone to die or a new museum to be built to be able to do that. So that part of the movie was quite unrealistic, at least when I did my research. So yeah.
Yeah, I can say my best friend is a art historian. She has a PhD in Italian Renaissance art. Mm-hmm. The depictions of the Trevi Fountain in this movie probably make her want to die.
Sure.
But yeah, it's really, really hard to find a job, and even in academia, it's really, really hard. So I love the life that is depicted of Kristen Bell's life as a curator in this movie. I wish it was realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's what rom-coms are.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it look so glamorous, but in reality, it's not.
Yeah, so I have to say that this movie is pretty cheesy, but there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about in it, and it has an all-star cast.
Yeah, I was really surprised how
the cast of this movie is amazing.
Yeah, and it's such a cheesy movie.
So in addition to Kristen Bell, who I think now is pretty much a household name, but I've been loving Kristen Bell a long time, since her Veronica Mars days. It also stars her real life husband, Dax Sheppard.
I did not know that he was actually her husband. I don't really keep up with like the lives of celebrities much, so that's really interesting.
Yes, the guy that plays Gail. We will, yeah, that's her real life husband.
Cool.
And then also Will Arnett, Danny DeVito, Angelica Houston, Kristen Shaw makes an appearance. It's like everybody's in this movie. Jon Heder, aka Napoleon Dynamite. It's just like everybody.
Yeah.
So let's dive in. So the movie starts out at a gala event that has been organized by Beth, aka Kristen Bell. I'm going to do my best to call her Beth, but I'm probably just going to call her Kristen Bell like half the time. And as we said, she's a curator. And so apparently she's put this whole exhibit together, and it's at the end of the night. Everything's gone perfectly. And she's like on top of the world. She's happy it's done. She's finally taking a break to actually eat something, which if anybody here has worked a wedding, no.
I feel very similar to that most
times. It's like, oh, I finally get to shove some food in my mouth. Fantastic.
Yeah. And it's like all the leftovers that they just put out for you.
And so she's feeling really high, and then she realizes that her ex, Brady, has shown up to this event. So he comes up to her just as she's taking a break in between bites of food, with spinach in her teeth, no less. And he says that he has to talk to her. And apparently this is the first time that they've talked since he broke up with her in an Applebee's.
I thought it was so funny because I'm thinking they live in New York. Like where, I'm sure there's one in like Times Square or something, but the Applebee's detail was pretty funny.
Yeah, well that just means that this person like really didn't like you, right? No offense to people who love going to Applebee's, but I don't know.
Here, have your dollar margarita and drink that before I break up with you.
Actually, dollar margaritas sound really good. I want to go to there now. Are they good?
I don't know. I've seen they have like some post circulating Facebook that's literally just like this giant margarita mix bucket, but it's like one of those huge industrial buckets, and it's like sitting in the back, and they're just like dumping cheap tequila in it. So
maybe not.
Like $1, it might not be worth it.
It's mostly sugar water with like a little bit of tequila.
Exactly.
And so he comes up to her, and for a few minutes, she and all of us watching at home think that they might get back together. This is obviously a rom-com. Only Brady is not the picture on the poster for this movie. So
you realize pretty quickly that's probably not going to go very well.
Yeah. So instead he says to her that he has learned something since they broke up, that it doesn't matter how hard someone works as long as you love them enough. And at first she's like, yes, that's right. And then he says, I met someone who works just as hard as you do, only now I can accept her for that. Low blow, dude.
Yeah.
Low blow.
But I do feel like that, like, kind of theme of overworking herself and being more dedicated to her job and stuff like that kind of goes throughout. And that's something that I can definitely relate to now, not necessarily when I watched it like back in high school, but I can definitely relate to the like hustle and kind of like putting everything else in the back burner. So that's pretty realistic.
It is. And it's also a stereotype that we see a lot in rom-coms of this like, how do you have it all? Like, you've got to choose between your career and your love life, or your career and family. And it's definitely set this up in this movie as that she is somebody who has clearly chosen her career over love. And it's a little judgy in the way it comes off. Like, she seems okay with it, but the way that it presents her in the movie is like, but she's not really okay with it. And so she sees her ex, and he tells her that he's getting engaged to this other woman, and somebody at the party overhears the word engaged. And suddenly like her friends and the DJ announce to the entire event that Beth is getting engaged. And it's this like moment of terrible embarrassment.
And like the sound effect of like, because there's a DJ there, and the
here
sound
comes the bride.
It's like everybody stops and is like, "Oh, Beth's getting engaged." Like that was just classic rom-com sound effect.
Yes, and he does play like a techno-y version of "Here Comes the Bride" over it, and it's like, okay, this is if she was really getting engaged, this is not how I would want to announce it.
Even if it was real, yeah.
So then after she clarifies that no, she is not getting engaged, her heel breaks, just to add some insult to injury. So she has to wobble on her way home on her broken heel, and she says to herself, this is like the worst night of my life. And she wobbles into her fancy apartment, which once again,
very unrealistic.
No one in New York in their 20s has that apartment.
No. Yeah.
No one. And then her sister Joan arrives at her doorstep. And Joan is super excited to tell her sister that she has just gotten engaged.
Classic. Of course. Why wouldn't it?
So she met this guy on a plane from Italy, and they've known each other for 2 weeks now, and they just know. Because when you know, you know.
Yeah. And you know how romantic those 13-hour plane rides are with babies crying and germs everywhere, and that's just where you want to fall in love, right?
Yes, and the smell of the recycled air and the toilet. It's so real fun.
And romantic.
And so clearly Beth is immediately doubtful and says that, 2 weeks isn't even long enough to run a credit check. But she seems to just accept that this is her sister and this is what her sister does and it's happening and okay. So the next day at work, Beth is filling in her friend and assistant Stacy about her sister's engagement. And Stacy's
she's my favorite character in the whole movie. I love her.
Remind me, do you know the actress's name?
I don't, but I know she's in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, she's from Garfunkel and Oates, but I don't remember the actress's name.
I'm sure once I would recognize it, but yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, so Stacy's yay! Clearly, Stacy in this movie is the one that's believe in love. And Beth's just instead of chasing a fairy tale, you could focus on work. And you know what? I've never been happier. And it's a little bit like she's trying to convince herself. But that's a pretty realistic statement. Chasing a fairy tale usually does not end up with what we think of as a fairy tale wedding.
Yeah.
Except for in rom-coms.
Exactly.
Spoiler alert.
Not many of us live in rom-coms.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. In this rom-com, there will be a fairy tale wedding. In fact, there will be 2. So yes. So Beth is really kind of only saying this to make herself feel better about her lack of romance. But I wish she just actually meant it because some people can be perfectly happy just working instead of chasing a fairy tale. So she sits down and she tells her boss, who is played by Angelica Houston, once again, how did they get all of these really big deal actors into this movie, that she's going to go to Rome in 2 days for her sister's wedding. And so there's all this pressure to organize her next gala event, and she's going to have to do it from afar, and her boss is clearly not okay with this. Which, I don't know, I kind of want to talk a little bit about just the way that movies depict expectations around around the clock availability. Mm-hmm. And I know that this is something that the whole hustle economy talks about too. You've got to always be on. So what did you think about that? The idea that she couldn't leave for a weekend to go to her sister's wedding without getting some side eye from her boss.
I mean, I guess on one hand from her boss, I could understand we've had this event planned and what do you mean your sister is getting married in 2 days? I could see how she might not necessarily believe her that that's really what she's doing, just because how weddings aren't typically planned in a week. So I mean, I guess from that standpoint I can understand why she would be a little thrown back, but the way that she approaches it is super just very antagonizing and just makes her feel terrible, which doesn't help any situation. And that whole boss and Kristen relationship is sort of strained throughout the movie. But I think that her expectation that she's just going to be there maybe if she's getting paid enough to afford that apartment in New York, she's getting paid to be around the clock or be available around the clock. But it's unrealistic for anyone. I feel weddings and babies and death and all of those big life things kind of supersede a lot of the expectations that work might have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel in regular rom-com fashion, you always need like a bad guy or somebody who's trying to like stop things from happening in this like happily ever after scenario. And I feel like this movie has about 6 of those things, but her boss is definitely one of them. But so she does go ahead. She flies to Rome for her sister's wedding.
Which, who's paying for that ticket? I mean,
I know.
Well, if she can afford that apartment, she can probably afford a super quick flight to Rome. But that would stress me out. I'm a planner, so the thought of just like up and leaving and having to go to another country and like your passport and that stresses me out.
Well, and also, you know, who's putting on this wedding?
That was like my biggest question throughout the whole movie is, okay, sure, she only has a couple family members going, but that's also like 6 or 7 tickets to Rome on last minute notice that she's paying for, or someone's paying for.
Yeah, and we quickly find out that, well, her sister works in Rome, apparently. Stacy makes a joke about how nice it must be to work in a country where they divide men into classes. Which was pretty funny. But so like we quickly find out that her parents are divorced, and you know, I think that's also a stereotype we see a lot in rom-coms of like child of divorced parents can't believe in love.
And like the interactions that she has with her sister too, like they don't really go much into their relationship, but I think that was also like I want to know more about like their upbringing and like where they are, like she and her sister close, and like obviously they live in different countries, but I don't know, she seems very quick to support her sister, which is good, but also very weary of what her sister's doing, so that just I kind of wonder like what their relationship is like or what it was supposed to be like.
Yeah, there really isn't a ton of character building.
No.
It's more like humorous things happen, not a lot of character building, but humorous stuff. So she makes it to the wedding on time. You know, she checks in with her family, and she's, you know, up at the front of the church. They're apparently getting married right in front of the Trevi Fountain. I can't imagine that that's a cheap thing either.
No. And especially the last minute aspect, like that whole like the last minute thing just really, out of all of it, really gets me. I don't know, for some reason. But yeah, like, I mean, I've been to Italy. I haven't been to Rome. I lived in Florence for part of the summer when I was in college. So I know, like, the general, like, kind of culture from what I know from when I was there and that kind of thing. But, like, Italians don't do last minute things. They like to plan, and they're much more, like, let things happen as they happen. And, yeah. The whole, I don't know how they would feel about the whole, let's get married in 2 weeks type of thing.
So not a totally realistic Roman wedding.
No, okay. I don't think so. I mean, I can't say for sure because I've never been to one, but it doesn't seem like that would be very realistic for his side of the family to be like, yes, it's going to be great. Let's do it.
Well, maybe if, you know, her side of the family is paying for everything, they don't really care.
True.
So as the wedding is getting started, the best man walks in late, and his phone is going off, and frankly, the ringtone that plays says everything that I think we need to know about him. His ringtone is "She Is My Cherry Pie," and it's loud, and it's obnoxious, and he keeps dropping it. We discover pretty quickly that he's a giant klutz.
Yeah. And the fact that the priest is like singing it too, just
yeah. She's my cherry pie. If you're a late 20s, early 30s guy and that's your ringtone, I've got to raise an eyebrow to you.
Yes.
But Beth doesn't seem to care about his ringtone. She's just excited and like jealous that he has a reception and she does not, because all she cares about is checking in on work. So the wedding reception begins, and Beth is talking to her dad about his new girlfriend and makes some snide comment about how she guessed he's due for a new wife. It's a low blow. But, like, her dad doesn't seem to care. He seems kind of cool with it.
Yeah, her dad is a really interesting character. I feel like you said, they don't really do much character building, so I don't know what their relationship is. And I don't know, does it say how many wives he's had?
No.
I don't think it said. So, I mean, then you start to think, okay, well, how many marriages have you had? And I don't know. But even still, like, I would not have the guts to say that to one of my parents. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I would not be able to be that blunt even if I felt that way.
Yeah, it's a weird interaction because he like immediately brushes it off and is just like, yeah, I guess so.
He's probably, I mean, depending on like how many marriages he's had, and it sounds like he's heard it before and he's not that surprised that she's like kind of mad about it. So I don't know.
Well, and the way that he says this next thing, he's like, you refuse to fall in love and I can't stop, is almost like, this is just me. It's okay.
It's fine. I've
Stop
accepted
judging me.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of cool, that he's like, yeah, I like to fall in love. Whatever. Of course, her mom clearly is not okay with that approach, but I don't know. I appreciate that they are like talking about, there's somebody who's gone through a divorce who's talking about it from the perspective of like,
it's
this
fine.
just is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So just in case that we forgot that the wedding was in Italy, we queue up a bunch of like apparently Italian wedding traditions. The first one, which is a legit wedding tradition of breaking the vase. So in this tradition, typically it's the couple that at the end of the wedding will break a vase, and the number of pieces that it smashes into represents how many years of happiness that they will have together. And in this movie, they ask Beth to break the vase, and she just cannot break that thing.
And the sound that it makes, like when she's trying to break it, is just like, where did they get this? Like, obviously, I know it's
a piece of metal,
but it's so funny. Like, I don't know. Yeah,
it echoes like a hollow tin piece of metal.
Exactly.
And they have her throw it around the reception, and she's like breaking glasses and injuring guests.
Yeah.
Yes. Grandma gets hit in the face with the vase.
And is magically fine. Like, as heavy as this thing seems, she's fine. She's totally okay.
But then, fear not, Nick, the best man, steps up,
swoops in and rescues her
with his manly brute strength. Yeah, which, like, okay, this is supposed to be the start of them being endeared to each other, but so far we've got the cherry pie ringtone and man rescuing with brute strength. So I don't know how I'm feeling about this guy at this point.
And of course he's like classically tall and tan and has like nice brown hair, and he just seems like such an all-American boy that every girl would want to fall in love with, which is just barf a little bit.
He plays football.
Yeah.
And so they also asked Beth to, as the maid of honor, to give a speech, but she doesn't know any Italian, and apparently no one from her sister-in-law's family knows any English.
Which is also unrealistic. I mean, when I was in Italy, most people at least had like a basic understanding. There were only a couple times when I had trouble communicating, but pretty much every other country learns more than one language, and English is usually one of them. So I thought that was a little unrealistic too.
Yeah, and also that if they've planned this wedding knowing that half of the family that's there speaks English and half the family that's there speaks Italian, that like there would be no translation whatsoever, or that like the groom wouldn't offer to translate since he apparently knows both languages, or it just seemed like, okay, we're gonna throw this person up there and not have a plan.
And like toasts are the most, for me at least, like going to weddings, toasts are the most unpredictable time of the wedding, just based on like how different they can be. And that's definitely one tradition that I kind of wish went out the window, but that's just me personally. But you don't know how it's gonna go. Like there are some people that are very eloquent, some people that go the funny route and flop, and it's just, I feel like during toasts most people are a little weary of like, okay, how is this gonna go? But
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think toasts, unless you're like a professional writer.
Yeah. And like, don't get me wrong, I've heard like my share of really sentimental and sweet speeches that make everyone cry. And then usually it's like, and this is a story that you haven't heard, and like something about women and like whatever, or like
here's an inside joke about this dude.
And like I had one wedding that the maid of honor told a story that the bride didn't recall happening, and that was really weird. She was like, yeah, I didn't do that. And that was like super awkward because no one knew what to say after that point. And they were like, oh, well, that's kind of a funny story. But she kept saying, no, I didn't do that. I don't remember that. So yeah, they're just a really awkward time. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of toasts.
All right, that's a whole other article that we need to write for Catalyst about really inappropriate toast topics.
Exactly.
So yeah, Nick jumps in to help translate because apparently he knows Italian. So they explain that like the two of them were roommates in college, but it still doesn't really make sense to me that the groom's best man is this guy from New York.
Yeah.
But sure.
Of course.
It's got to make sense for the movie. So sure. And so Nick's pretty bad at translating. All of the groom's family is kind of left thinking that Beth wants to sleep with her new brother-in-law or something. It's very awkward and uncomfortable.
The mom's reaction too, she's kind of like, what are you doing? Like, I think she kind of is worried that she's gonna like turn into her father and like just jump into things, or turn into her sister and just jump into it. But the mom's reaction is super weird.
I think I remember her saying something along the lines of like, he looks nice, but so did your dad. And
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Ooh, okay, I get it. You're not over it.
Yeah, you're not over it.
You are not over it.
Yeah, and definitely like when I'm talking to couples, like I send them a questionnaire, and one of the things is like, is there any family drama that I should be aware of? Because that makes the whole day awkward for people if, like, especially like in this day and age, there are a lot of divorced couples, and so if you're not aware of that, it can make for an awkward situation. So that part was definitely not unrealistic. I could definitely see that happening in a lot of weddings.
I do kind of find it funny that like they mentioned that her dad brought his girlfriend, but we never see her.
Yeah, you know, don't see her at all.
She's mentioned that she's like a pro volleyball player or something, and how beautiful she is, but we don't see her at all. Which is kind of weird.
You got all these other great actors. Like, why couldn't you have gotten one of the girlfriends?
Yeah, but also we see the dad plenty at that wedding. Yeah. And later on we see the dad. And at no point do we see his apparent girlfriend, which is like, okay. But yeah, so the reception is going on, and Beth and Nick get to talking because now, like, he's helped her out twice, so she's like, okay, you're being nice to me. And they're talking about Beth's sister and her new husband, and basically, like, each of them is getting info from the other one. Like, is she a good person? Is he a good person? And finally, Nick's like, yeah, I give it a year.
Mm-hmm.
And Beth's
like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, finally someone I can talk to about this, because I think it's going to go terribly. Like, she just switches so much. Like, that interaction is really interesting to me and super funny. Like, it's sort of like the misery loves company. Like, when you find someone that shares the same viewpoint as you, you're like, oh my gosh, finally someone who understands like what I'm thinking. And they definitely bond over that.
And she like retorts with like, this marriage has the shelf life of a banana. Which is like way harsh, sister. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like that's gonna get back to your sister somehow,
probably,
but still. And then Nick says the whole thing about like, they haven't even known each other long enough for a credit check. And apparently this is the thing that
ding, ding, ding. He must be the one. He said the same thing as me.
Yes, we both are joined together based on our values of running credit checks on people. Yeah. Which is not really saying we're both joined together in our general mistrust for other human beings, because that's kind of what it says to me.
Hey, I really like you, and we bonded over the fact that your best friend and my sister are going to probably fail. Like, setting up for such a great relationship. And a deep history of knowing how long credit checks take.
Yeah, and I think like all of this makes total sense for two people that are both in the wedding party and are at a wedding and maybe like hook up at the wedding.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's also like such a stereotype too of like, oh, like if you're a single groomsman, you better get the single bridesmaid, like, which I haven't really gone to like attended many weddings, but as far as I know, that's never really.
That's not how it goes.
No, that's not how it goes. Like, most of the people that are there, you either know or don't know at all. And it's not like you're in a situation where you're going to be sitting and talking the whole night. Like, oh, now I like know this person. It's whatever. Yeah, it's just, it doesn't happen.
But yeah, so they're like getting along. They start dancing. And because of Nick's extreme clumsiness, he in this dance, he kicks a tray of Prosecco and it goes flying. P.S. I am drinking Prosecco right now with our Italian theme.
Fancy, yeah. I'm not that cool. I am drinking a Michigan wine, though. It is my favorite wine. It is called Secret Beach from St. Ambrose Cellars. So any of you listeners are in Michigan, you should check it out. It is it's like kind of sweet, but not super sweet, but also like really easy to drink table wine. And yeah, I love it. It's super good.
I'm drinking Kirkland brand bulk Prosecco.
Nice. The bulk part just makes it so much better.
Thank you, Costco.
Right.
So yes, he kicks a tray of Prosecco and it goes flying and it lands on a surge protector and all the lights go out.
Mm-hmm. Which also, like, why would that be uncovered? And like that, it's in such a fancy, like if you watch the movie, you see how fancy this reception place is. Like, I feel like there must be some sort of protective system for electrical equipment.
Clearly this has happened before.
Yeah.
Also, if you get water on the surge protector, you're probably not going to black out the entire building.
No. I mean,
but it has to go all dark so that when the lights come back up, they're embraced.
It's perfect. It's so great.
And you think they're about to kiss and this is the moment. And then we realize that Beth has taken Nick's phone out of his pocket. Which is like, I appreciate that, Beth. You know what you're after. You are trying to get this work done.
Get it, girl. But it's sort of weird, too, because, like, she seems kind of put in the beginning of the movie when she's talking to her boss about, like, I need to go and whatever. Like, she seems kind of reluctant to, like, not – at first she seems reluctant to, like, not take a break. But then, like, when she's in the taxi on the way from the airport, she keeps talking about, like, being on her phone. And then at the wedding reception, she's talking about being on her phone. So this feels sort of, like, disjointed. Like, at first she doesn't really want to necessarily work, but knows that she has to. And then she's, like, super gung-ho, and that's, like, all she's focused on. But
yeah, and maybe even after, like, her and Nick exchange that they both believe that this wedding is not going to last, she's like, well, I guess I could just work after all.
It'll be fine.
Yeah. But so she eventually decides that, okay, I guess I'm going to make a move on this guy. She goes out to the fountain. She's stolen a bottle of Prosecco and 2 glasses. And as she's walking out, she sees Nick with this other woman who kisses him. And she's just like, yep, I'm an idiot. Why did I think that this was going to work? Yeah. So she walks over to the Trevi Fountain and is like, fountain of love, what a crock. I mean, we wait our whole lives for some guy to sweep us off our feet. Well, guess what? He's not coming. Mm-hmm. Which I do kind of like, because it's like, even though things, spoiler alert, things work out just fine for Beth.
I mean, it's a rom-com. How could it not?
Yeah, but like, it's also, I like the idea that even if stuff does work out, the belief that like, it doesn't have to be some guy that comes and sweeps us off our feet.
And like, she's made... Like, she's gotten this job for herself. Like, I'm assuming gone to school. Like, she has friends. She seems really close with the people that she works with, except for her boss. Like, she has all these things going for her that she's done for herself. And I think that's, like, even though we, like, obviously everything turns out great for her, like, I think realistically, she doesn't seem the type of person that would, like, sulk about this like guy that she met in Italy. Like, I think she would be able to kind of pick herself up and be like, you know what, like, my life is great. I've done all this stuff for myself. Like, I've gotten to where I am. I have a good job. I have friends, and like not really worried about this guy that it's not like she was like planning to go to this wedding to meet someone to marry. Like, that's not her thought. So I don't think that she would be super like upset about it if it did.
If she had never seen him again, because she seemed perfectly fine never seeing him again.
Right. She's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. But she does decide to take some coins. So the whole thing with the Trevi Fountain is you throw a coin in and you make a wish for love and blah, blah, blah. So she climbs into the fountain, which is apparently illegal. And she steals some coins from the fountain. And she's like, each of these is a desperate wish for love, and it's never going to come true. So she's just going to take the coins and save these people from their desperate wish for love. And this is when the plot of the movie takes an even cheesier turn.
Oh, yeah.
So as she's picking out all these coins, we see all these men's faces suddenly like awaken with love for her, or just with like a look of love and
they
awe.
only happen to be right by the fountain still, which is like, oh, she picked up, what is that, like 4 coins. Okay, what are the odds that all those people are literally going to be right next to the fountain? Who knows how long after they've thrown them in there?
Also, that all of these coins belong to men.
Right.
I would have enjoyed this movie just as much if some of those coins had belonged to ladies.
Exactly.
You know?
Thanks, Hollywood.
It's also at this moment when Nick walks out, and he also has a look of love on his face.
I've seen
And
the look.
yeah, in awe of her as she's twirling around in the fountain. Like, if I didn't love Kristen Bell so much at this point, I'd be like, whoa, guys, this movie.
Too much, yeah.
But so we're kind of like, oh, is he falling in love with her now too because of this coin? And he's about to approach her, and they're about to have their like perfect happy ending when the police come and they chase Seth out of the fountain, and that's that. And she returns home to work, and it's just like going about her life.
She's fine. She's not super upset that she didn't see him again. Like, she has that moment of like, oh crap, that would have been nice, but she's not like super set on it. And like when she gets back to New York, she's just like, okay, whatever.
Time to get to work.
Yeah.
And Nick even calls her and asks her out and is like, I got your number from your sister. And she's just like, nah, dude, I'm good. Yeah. Which, you know, I think is great. But then immediately chaos starts to ensue. And we see all of these dudes whose coins she has stolen suddenly appear in her life. They all apparently got on the same exact flight that she was on back to New York.
And can afford it. Like,
and can afford it.
Or thing. I don't know.
That street magician Lance suddenly has a teleportation device we didn't know about.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, is like, why were they in Italy in the first place? Because like some of them are supposedly American and all from New York City, or visiting and able to stay there. It's just very bizarre.
It's incredibly bizarre.
Yeah.
But so first we see Antonio, who is an artist who's played by Will Arnett. And this is where shit gets creepy as fuck.
It really is.
So he's a painter, and he is literally chasing her through Central Park, asking to paint her feet.
Yeah.
And like, it's at the point where she's like running for her life.
Yeah.
If lady doesn't want you to touch her,
don't do it.
Don't do it. And don't chase her around the park.
Exactly. And like, she kind of makes a big-ish deal about like not wanting to talk to him. And I'm thinking, okay, all these people that are watching this exchange happen, like, why aren't you telling him to leave her alone? Clearly she's uncomfortable, but
yeah, nobody's calling the cops.
No.
Like,
no cops happen to be around to see it.
Aggressive.
If that was me, I'd be super, like, I'm the type of person, I am like such a millennial in that I hate talking to strangers. And so like, even if I felt like someone was like safe, I would just like ignore them if they were trying to talk to me, especially like in Central Park, you know, like I wouldn't even acknowledge it. But yeah, I feel bad.
It's scary. And but like, also then he runs into one of the horse-drawn carriages, and she like turns around to see if he's okay. And I'm like,
hey,
no, you keep running.
You don't know. Yeah.
You keep running.
And then my first thought was like, I felt bad for the horse. I'm like, okay, first of all, you're like pulling people around, which we could talk about that all day. But the fact that some dude literally just like bolts into you and crashes into the cart, and like the guy that's driving it is like kind of concerned, but he really like, I would be mad. I wouldn't be asking him what he like if he was okay right away. Like, you know what? You just interrupted my day of work and ruined my carriage.
You're stalking a woman.
Right. Very
Right.
problematic.
Ugh, yeah, so once he like is clearly okay and it's clear that he is stalking her, she runs away again, but it's like does not bode well. And so later that day in the park, we meet street magician Lance, who is played by Jon Heder, aka Napoleon Dynamite. And he steals her watch as like a street magician move. It's really creepy, and like he keeps doing it, and she's like, this is really creepy because clearly you just touched me and I didn't realize it.
Right.
And yeah, so basically
it's real weird.
I feel like the biggest theme of this entire movie is consent.
Yes, definitely.
And it keeps coming up. So like next she's in a restaurant and Dale, who is played by Dax Sheppard and who is apparently a model, shows up and he takes off his shirt to show off his abs, and she's like trying to get away from him.
And also, like, if I were her, I would have just been like, I don't know if anyone listens to My Favorite Murder, but fuck the boyfriend.
Yes, like, thank you. I was about to say that.
Yeah, like, I don't care how nice you're trying to be and like, okay, yeah, pay for the food that you bought, but like, get the hell up away from this creepy dude, and you don't have to be nice to anyone if you feel unsafe. And she clearly feels super uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really fully understand because I feel like there were moments in there where they were trying to make it be like awkward, cute, especially because Dax Sheppard is her actual husband in real life, but like it was not cool.
No. And like I felt, okay, so like if you see him, I kind of feel like, okay, he's sort of a feminine guy and like he has this cherry blossom tattoo. He seems very over the top, like they're trying to poke fun at like male models, which like, okay, whatever. But yeah, it just seems like it's a little bit
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's creepy, but it's also like maybe offensive.
Yeah. Like I felt like during most of these interactions with these guys, it's just very cringeworthy and like, yeah, it's just super uncomfortable. I don't know. They could have made it so much less gross feeling.
And I don't know if that, like, it's hard to know if it is intentional how gross it is,
right,
or if they thought it was funny, but it definitely seems like a lot of sexual harassment and stalking and creepy shit for the sake of humor.
And this happens all in like one day too. Like if I were her, I would feel so creeped out and like I'm gonna lock myself in my apartment now because, and like her sister's asking her like, has anything weird happened? Like she kind of thinks about it for a second and is like
yes, no, a ton of stuff has happened and it's been very strange.
All of these men going after you, and it's not just like normal. I mean, okay, I shouldn't say normal because it's terrible, but it's not just like catcalling on the street or like whatever, like that unfortunately most women experience, especially in New York City, like big cities like that. But it's more than that. It's like aggressive stuff that she should immediately be like, yeah, there's something going on. This is really creepy.
Yeah, so she gets to work after she runs into these three guys, and so clearly things are not off to a great start. She gets a phone call from her sister, who apparently like has found out that she was in the fountain because it's in the tabloids in Rome.
The fact that like the headline is so big, it's like stupidissima or whatever, like
yeah. And that's when she tells her sister that she stole the coins, and then her sister's husband is like, oh no, the spell.
It's terrible. How could you ever do that? Yeah.
So now she knows that these guys are under a spell. She's at work and she's just realized that all of these men are stalking her and will keep stalking her until she can return the coins to the fountain in Rome, which is like not going to happen. And she also finds out that the centerpiece for her next art exhibit is not coming.
Mm-hmm.
And at that same moment, Nick shows up.
Yes.
Even though she has told him she is not interested.
Mm-hmm.
He finds out where she works from her sister and shows up.
And that's another thing that really bothers me is like, okay, maybe I could.
Girl said no.
Right.
He said no.
And if like, okay, if Kristen's character had told her sister, you know, hey, I thought this guy was really cute, but like I didn't get his number. Like she didn't even know that they really hit it off, I don't think. So for her sister to just be like, here's her information, like it must be good. She must want to like have all this attention and have you go after her. Like if I were her, I'd be like, excuse me, sister, like please don't give my information to random men that you don't know if I'm interested in. Like that's also really creepy.
Yeah, it's one thing to give somebody your phone number or like an email address. It's another thing to be like, this is where she works, and this is how you can track her down in person.
Yes, this is her mother's maiden name. Like, this is the last four of her social security.
Here's how you can see her identity.
Yeah, exactly.
And so as, you know, Nick shows up, Beth is telling her boss the bad news about the art piece not coming up, and apparently it's an exhibit on pain because sure. And then Nick jumps in and is like, oh, she has something better, this photograph that nobody has ever seen of me getting struck by lightning. So yes, apparently the reason that he is such a giant klutz is because he has no peripheral vision, because he was once struck by lightning while playing football.
Which, okay, we skipped this part, but Danny DeVito's character somehow, like, wiggles his way into, like, the back door, like, the back offices of the Guggenheim, which, okay, first of all, that's, like, super unrealistic.
Well, he comes in and says that he's going to be their new patron, and her boss is, like, super thrilled, apparently, that they've got this...
by name, or, and then he's like, oh, I recognize you. You're the hit. And then she's like, what does the hit mean? And then he goes into this whole thing of like, apparently everyone in the world except for her knows that this kid got struck by lightning during a football game and like had a concussion or whatever it was.
And also, let's talk about how unlikely it is that a famous art photographer just happened to be there.
Right.
To document the photo of the moment that he was struck by lightning.
Yeah, of course, because, you know, when scouts from colleges for football teams aren't there, it's always the photographers. I know that's what I do on every Friday night, is go and take some photos of all these high school
football games.
Yeah, no.
Or college football, doesn't matter. It's still very unlikely that a high-end art photographer whose work would be considered quality enough to be at the Guggenheim is going to just show up at a football game that you randomly are going to get struck by lightning at.
Never seen before. And she's all like, ooh, what is this? I'm intrigued.
Yes. So her boss is like, okay, sure, we'll get this famous photo. Now here's this new patron. Now show him around the museum.
It's so funny.
And at first it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, new patron. Great, I'll show him around. So he starts chasing her around and confessing his love, and he gives her sausage.
Yeah.
He literally gifts her his sausage, because apparently he's a sausage king.
Yeah, and like she's having kind of a vulnerable moment with him. Like before this happens, she's talking about like all of the art and how much it means to her and all that stuff. And it's like this dude, whether or not he's like in this spell, is like preying on her. There's literally no one around. But that's the other thing, is if you're at the Guggenheim, there should be people walking around noticing, oh, our curator is being chased around by this guy who's the sausage king and gifting her sausages in one of our galleries.
Yeah. It's real creepy.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly creepy, this is a horror film. Let's be real. This is a horror film.
Everybody's worst nightmare, being chased around by the sausage king. Like, that just sounds terrible.
Yeah, ew. He gifts her his sausage. Ew, ew, ew. So she has to sneak out into the alleyway to get away from him, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, it's like, so she comes out the door, and then there's Nick right there, and she has breath spray, and she sprays him in the face, like, as if it's pepper spray, but it's just like breath spray. And he's like, oh no, my eyes. And she's like, oh no, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize it was you. But once again, A, what is he doing right outside the door in the alleyway waiting for her to come out?
That's clearly marked service entrance to the Guggenheim. Okay, I've never been to the Guggenheim in New York. I've driven past it. I've never been there. But I highly doubt that there's a clearly marked service entrance and it looks like it's unlocked. Like, it looks like it's just a swinging door.
And he has no reason to think that she would be coming out. Because
he doesn't know what happened with the Sausage King. He has no idea. So why would you be lurking around the Guggenheim waiting for her?
She's lurking and stalking and trying to get in the building, which is so creepy, which I guess is supposed to make us believe that he is one of these guys, that he's just like under this spell.
Right.
But spoiler alert, guys, he's not one of these guys. This is just legitimately what he is doing because he thinks it's a good idea. And
where are the security cameras? Like, come on, it's a big enough place and if that is the service entrance, why wouldn't you have anyone, like, who knows how long he's been standing there, creeping through the alley, waiting for this lady, like, the whole bystander effect. If you see something, say something. All of these men are being creepy. Say something and do something, please.
Yeah. Ugh. Ugh. And like that, this is the theme for the majority of the movie. It's just like, she kind of likes Nick. At this point, she has no idea that like one of the coins may or may not belong to him. Right. She thinks he's just like legitimately into her. And they keep going about like maybe connecting, like maybe talking. And then all of her stalkers appear to like tear them apart. Yeah. And they just keep doing increasingly terrifying things. So Antonio, the painter, paints a giant nude portrait of her on the side of the building, which is not okay.
No. And she happens to be walking by when he's up there. Like,
yeah. Ugh. Al/Danny DeVito keeps gifting her obscene amounts of sausage. Yes. I was about to call him Ron because my husband went to Harvey Mudd in LA, and apparently the dorm that he lived in was named for a guy named Ron Lind, and he was the Sausage King. Like, he was an actual Sausage King. Like, this is a thing. And so we were watching this movie together, my husband was just really excited that Ron the Sausage King was in the movie, played by Danny DeVito. But
it's like a little picture of Danny DeVito on these sausages.
Yes, so I don't want to eat sausages that have Danny DeVito's face on them. I don't.
No.
But the creepiest thing is when Lance, the street magician, breaks into her house and is going to perform a like escape trick in her house. And she walks in, and he is hanging, wrapped up like a mummy, upside down from her ceiling. And like,
with Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite.
Yes, with Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite, which is kind of awesome. But like, there's a lot of good moments in this movie. Like, the actors are good. There's a lot of great one-liners. Like, there are good cameos like this. But the rest of it is a horror film.
It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen like there's a video that someone made of The Office, and it's like as a horror film with like Dwight, and then they like pull clips. They like pull clips from the whole series, and it turns into like this really creepy horror film. And so I feel like that would be super easy with this movie, just to like pull things and like put a super creepy soundtrack and like
you change the music on this, and it goes a whole other way. And so finally, it's getting to the time when her gala exhibition is supposed to go live, and she needs to get this photograph from Nick so that her work thing doesn't like crash and burn. And she calls him up, and basically he bribes her, saying that he will only give her the photograph if she goes on a date with him.
Douchebag move.
Yeah.
Come on.
What?
Oh, I'll only do what I promised you if you go on a date with me. Like, fuck off. Come on.
This is not good.
No.
And so he decides to take her to a restaurant called Blackout on Bleecker, which is a restaurant where you eat in pitch darkness.
Which
Um,
sounds terrible. I mean, I know that people go to that for like whatever, but I like to see my food. I like to know what I'm putting in my mouth.
yeah.
I don't want to be eating in pitch black. No, thank you.
And like, if this movie is being, if we look at this movie as actually a commentary of what modern romance is supposed to be like, and a
Mhm.
commentary of like that type of restaurant, then
Yeah.
I think it does a great job, because it shows me how freaking
Creepy.
terrifying it would
Yeah.
be in that restaurant.
And like
So,
the character, I'm blanking on her name, the actress's name. She's in Bob's Burgers.
oh, Kristen
Um,
Shaw.
yeah. She is like the hostess or like the waitress or whatever. And she has these like obnoxious, like military grade night vision goggles, which are terrifying at first. Like if you didn't know, because Kristen's character doesn't know what this restaurant is. She has no
Yeah,
idea.
she shows up and she finds out that they're going to eat in darkness, and he
Right.
pulls some line about, well, like, the last great moment we had together is when the lights went out in Rome. And it's like, ugh,
Ugh,
this
yeah.
is not going well.
And then like you like okay, so moving forward, like all of the guys somehow find out where she is. And like the idea of stalkery men being in a pitch black restaurant while I'm on a first date with some dude with waiters staring at me while I'm eating and drinking wine in the dark. No, thank you. That sounds terrifying.
Yes, and it's at this moment that like it goes from being like stalking and harassment to like full on assault. Like
Yeah. There's like
Antonio's on,
eyeglasses
yeah,
and yeah.
Antonio's under the table grabbing her feet.
Yes.
Um, Gail, aka Dax Sheppard, like grabs her hand and puts it on his abs.
Yeah.
It's just really gross.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of once again, it's a lot of harassment and assault for the sake of humor, and it's not cool. And part of the only reason that I think like the movie kind of knows what it's doing is as they're like escaping the restaurant and Beth just wants to go home, Nick's like, well, where would you feel safe? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like the first time the movie acknowledges
It doesn't feel safe.
she doesn't feel safe, that she's in this terrifying situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, clearly her apartment's out because the guys have broken into her apartment. She decides to take him to the Guggenheim, even though clearly the guys can find her there too. But I mean, I appreciate that the word safety actually came up, because up until
They,
now, it's just like, you just think this is funny movie?
right. No, but they're like actually acknowledging that like what is happening does not make her feel safe. And even though the stuff that he's doing, he's not under the spell and he's doing creepy things like on of his own volition or whatever, but like at least they're acknowledging that he's a decent enough guy and is realizing how uncomfortable she is at this point. Like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe he didn't realize how uncomfortable, like she has said many times that she didn't want to go out on a date with him, but it's like at least at this point he's starting to understand, you know, this stuff is going on, she doesn't feel comfortable, I am just going to try to help her at this point. Like, what can I do to help you and make you feel okay? Which is sort of redeeming, I guess.
Yeah. He gets like 5 positive points back.
5 positive points to Gryffindor. Let's go.
Yeah. So they go to the museum, and Beth shows him this Picasso painting of Maria Torres and talks about Picasso and Torres and their whole love affair, and confesses that she's afraid that she'll fall in love with somebody and they won't love her back, which is like another kind of stereotypical female position to take in a rom-com, right? And so things are finally going good between her and Nick, and they go back to his place and they start making out. And then she realizes that one of the coins she got from the fountain is actually one of Nick's poker chips. And she's like, oh shit, he is also under the spell.
He has to be. Why else would he be into me? I'm not worthy of love unless it's a spell kind of a situation.
Yeah, great. So she's just like, okay, it's not real. I've got to find a way to break the spell and just be done with it. And so finally, her sister and brother-in-law call to let her know that they talked to the grandma who she hit in the face with a vase, and she has informed them that if she just returns the coins to the men, then the spell will be broken. And her friend Stacy overhears this and is like, meddling Stacy.
Yes.
Stacy doesn't want Beth's love to end. So she takes all of the coins. But Beth doesn't realize this. So suddenly, like, Stacy leaves to go help set up at the art exhibition. And then all four of the crazy love-drunk men show up at her house.
She asked them there, or like she asked them to be there, which is like the first time that she's like kind of in control of the situation.
Yes, she's like shown some sort of interest in them, and suddenly they're all nice people, which is weird. So they all show up, and they're all being like relatively well behaved, though like super eager.
Yeah.
And she sits them all down, and she's like, sorry, I don't love you. I love Nick. And first of all, like, I don't think that anything has happened in this movie up to this point to justify her saying that she loves Nick.
No, like all he's done, okay, let's see. You were in Rome together for one night at your sister's wedding. You got rescued by him, rescued in air quotes, by him at the wedding. So he made you feel like he was protecting you. Okay, whatever. Then
he bribed you into a date after stalking you.
He bribed you into a date. He stalked you at your work. Like, you went to this restaurant that you didn't know where you were going and got assaulted by all these other guys. And then he said, oh, where would you feel safe? Oh, I must love him. He's great. He's perfect. No, that's not how it works.
Yeah. No, it's... And she tells them all that it's like, it's all going to be over though. It doesn't matter. And they're like, no, we'll help you because if we love you, we're going to help you, which like doesn't mesh with the way that they have acted up to this point.
They're all about like one track mind, like let's get to her. And then now all of a sudden, even though the spell isn't broken yet, they're being decent-ish human beings.
Yeah. There's something she says in there, I can't exactly remember like when it came up, but she basically is saying that she's got to go get the coins, and when she gives the coins back to everyone, it'll all be over. And that like even though she loves Nick, she has to give him his coin back because if I take his love against his will, that's not love at all. And it's like, thank you for acknowledging consent, movie. Yes. Thank you. Otherwise, I think that's called rape.
Yeah.
This whole movie needs a trigger warning. I feel like I definitely need to put a trigger warning on this podcast episode. Anyways, so the guys that apparently love her, and I'm putting love in quotes, enough to all get in a car and drive through a lightning storm, because apparently there's a lightning storm, so that she gets to her gala on time. So apparently that's like the redeeming moment for all these stalker guys, is that they help her get to the gala. And she gets the coins from Stacy, and she is returning them to everyone, and everyone immediately, the magic wears off, and they're all still pretty creepy. We find out Antonio, which I could like go into a whole lot of other things about the like kind of racist and xenophobic Italian accent and portrayal of an Italian man that they have Will Arnett do, which is not great. But Antonio confesses that his name is actually Anthony, and he's from New Jersey, and that he is a shoe salesman, not an artist.
Yeah.
And then everybody's still kind of creepy. Danny DeVito has like a slight moment of redemption when he was like, I threw this coin into the fountain because I just wished that I could feel like I did back when my wife was around. In the midst of all of this, she still hasn't returned the coin to Nick, but for some reason, Nick just like has to get to the Guggenheim. he's already dropped off the photograph.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really know why he's rushing to the Guggenheim so fast.
Yeah, there's not really an explanation for that.
No, he's just literally running down the street in a lightning storm, terrified that he's going to be struck by lightning again.
Right.
For no reason. Anyways, he gets there just in time, and, well, there's this whole thing where Lance the street magician is like, is this your coin? Like, he tries to steal the poker chip coin from Beth, and yeah, but eventually she gets it back from him, and she goes and she gives it to Nick, and she's like, okay, I guess this is over. I guess you're done loving me. Mm-hmm. But dun dun dun, he's got the coin and he still loves her.
Surprise.
Yes, surprise. We both love each other after 2 seconds together.
Okay. The irony of let's laugh at my best friend and your sister getting together after 2 weeks. Pretty sure that 2 weeks is longer than they've known each other by this point. Like, the timeline's a little fuzzy, but you were literally just talking shit about those people for being together for 2 weeks. And now, all of a sudden, it's okay if we do it because we believe that it's true. We have that feeling to go off of.
Because it wasn't a magic spell.
Right.
Yeah. So they confess their love to each other at the Guggenheim. Her gala exhibition has gone perfectly. Her life is great. Her love life is great. Finally, Beth has everything she's ever needed.
After all this time.
Yes. So then cut to a unclear amount of time in the future. Maybe it's a day. Maybe it's 6 months. It's really hard to tell. When suddenly, again, with another destination wedding in Rome. Hopefully, this one was a little bit more planned, but it's hard to say. And for some reason, Beth has decided to invite all of her stalkers to the wedding.
Because why not?
Because why not? And somehow...
They probably paid for their ticket, too.
Well, I mean, somehow they ended up in Italy the first time.
That's true.
They're all secretly rich. I don't know.
And I guess they had like this bonding experience with her, but it's like I doubt that she kept in touch with them. So why? Okay, people planning a wedding, cut all the guests that you can. Like, those would be the first people that I would cut off my guest list if I was getting married, and I wouldn't even think
the men that stalked me. Yes, yeah, I would cut them from my guest list,
and I wouldn't even think about it in the first place. But still, like, and
pro tip, America: if a man stalks you, don't invite him to your wedding.
Yeah.
Pro tip.
Right.
Ugh. Yes. So everybody, all of her stalkers show up. Danny DeVito is suddenly there as the date of her boss, Angelica Houston.
Which I think is
it is pretty cute. It is pretty cute. Danny DeVito has a redeeming quality at the end of this movie. Of all of the stalkers, he is the least creepy somehow after chasing her with sausage.
It's pretty hard to come back from that, so.
Yes, and he never actually, like, groped her, so that's better than the other people. Anthony's there, and he's sitting next to Gail, and, like, Gail's like, oh, you're an artist, I'm a model, and he's like, I would really love to do a nude portrait with you, and they're like, yeah, I'd like that too. So I kind of got the vibe that, like, there was going to be something going on there.
Yeah. I kind of wish that they would have, like, I don't know.
Done something real with it. But
yeah, like, yeah. Whatever. They only have an hour and a half to put it together.
And there was so much stalking that...
True. Where was the time to create a homosexual relationship? There's just no space for that, right?
It just got cut in the midst of the men saving the day and stalking you.
Yeah.
So now Lance, the street magician, who's also there, comes up to Beth as she's getting ready in her dress and is like, oh no, I gave you the wrong poker chip. I found this one in my bag of tricks, which is like, really, he's still really creepy.
Yeah.
He does not change. And so Beth is like, personal dilemma. do I break the spell now on my wedding day and he won't love me anymore? Or do I marry him knowing that I have trapped him in a non-consensual marriage? There's so much issue with all of this. Anyways, so then her dad is like, oh, Beth, remember that the passion is in the risk. And it's like, that is the right sentiment of like, you should marry him if he actually loves you. But it's said with like a little bit of air of like, you could go either way.
Right.
And the answer should be
not super helpful.
No, you should not marry this man if you are literally believing that you are forcing him to love you against his will.
Yeah.
But okay.
Sure.
Because consent goes both ways here.
Right.
Anyways, she walks down the aisle. Their wedding starts. She still has not given him the coin. And suddenly the priest, who we saw at the very beginning, is getting real snippy. He is like cracking jokes about Nick. And it's just like clearly he's acting a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally, Kristen Bell runs out of the wedding. She's once again crying at the fountain. She's yelling at the fountain because clearly this is all the fountain's fault. And Nick runs out and is like, WTF, girlfriend, why are you doing this to me again? Like, why are you once again throwing a poker chip in my face and saying, it's all over, you don't love me anymore?
He's like, come on, we've done this once.
Now you're doing it again at this very expensive destination wedding where you've flown in a bunch of stalker men that wanted to be with you. I'm very uncomfortable. Yes. Even if you think it's a good idea to invite your ex-stalkers to your wedding, I would hope that your partner would veto that.
Yeah. Someone needs to have some sense in them. One of the two of you.
And so then finally she hands him the coin and he's like, I never threw this in the fountain. I don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so they drop it into the fountain, which sets the priest free because apparently he's been actually in love with her this whole time. And if it weren't for his vows of celibacy, he would have been stalking her right along with everyone else.
Good to know.
Great.
Thanks, Catholic Church. The only reason that he wasn't stalking her.
You finally did something right, Catholic.
Congratulations. Pope Francis would be proud.
Ugh. And so we find out that their love was real all along, and they get married, and they live happily ever after.
Of course.
The end.
Nothing bad could ever happen in a rom-com.
Except for it did for solid an hour and a half.
Yeah.
This movie. There's such good cast, and there are really good one-liners.
Mm-hmm.
Like we didn't even like talk about Nick's friend Puck, who's played by what's his name from SNL.
I grew this beard while you were talking to her.
Yeah, he has a lot of great one-liners. Like when Beth and Nick are making out at his apartment, he shows up with beers and he's like, 6 beers enter, no beers leave. That gave me a real good chuckle. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess they needed this guy to be the comedic relief from all the stalking and sexual harassment. Yeah. I can't decide if it is hard to watch.
Yeah.
Like, if it's potentially really triggering or if it like does an okay job of talking about consent and like I think it could have done a better job of talking about consent.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. So that's When in Rome.
Yeah. Tie it up in a little bow. There you go.
Uh-huh. So typically, I have a couple of like wedding related questions. That I would ask. This conversation, I feel like, was much more about other things than the actual wedding.
Well, the actual wedding part is they don't really other than the vase thing, they don't really go much into the wedding. I was kind of disappointed because it's like you have this opportunity to show a wedding in another culture but they didn't really focus on that part. I know that the sister isn't the main storyline, but they didn't even really go into Kristen Bell's wedding either. They kind of skipped over it.
No, it was 2 seconds long because she ran out of it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I still will ask you.
Okay.
For both weddings, let's assume they're roughly the same cost. How much do you think that wedding costs as a trained wedding professional?
Easily upwards of $50,000. Rental for that space, I'm sure, is a ton. And for her sisters especially, it looks like there's a huge crowd. So you think of catering and all of that stuff. And if whoever was paying for plane tickets, that also adds in a lot of cost.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think nowadays we kind of think of destination weddings as being more elopements, but this was definitely not that. This was a full-blown Italian wedding.
Yeah, especially her sister's wedding, because all of his family lived there.
Right.
With Beth and Nick's wedding, it was more of that elopement, we're just going back here because this is where we met, kind of situation. And it's less of a huge affair, but still.
Yeah. You're going to Italy. It's going to be expensive. Even just to get them there, even if they were just flying themselves out there, that's around $4,000, let's say, plus however long they were there to stay and all that stuff. It adds up. It was not a cheap wedding at all.
If you've got tons of money and you want to spend it on a destination wedding, go you. But
take me with you.
Yeah, I think we've got to assume some amount of money on the part of her parents, because a sports writer and an art curator, maybe she's getting paid quite a bit as an art curator, but still, I don't think that they're paying for this wedding.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and so what's the most realistic part about weddings in this movie?
The awkward toasts. The awkward toasts and the family drama. I feel like that's super realistic. I think weddings are definitely one of those situations where a lot of pent up emotion kind of comes out. I don't know. There's a lot of things that you need to confront your feelings about family and the people that you're close to that comes out in weddings. And I think that is kind of shown here. I feel like that stuff is super realistic. And I always say that the things that happen in your wedding, at the end of the day, as long as you're married, that's what matters. So all the rest of the stuff is kind of extra. And the fact that her sister, at least at her wedding, is totally does not care that everything is going wrong. Not everything, but she doesn't care that the vase isn't breaking. She doesn't care that all this stuff is happening. The power went out. She's just happy to be getting married. And I think that's a super important takeaway.
So what do you feel like is the least realistic part?
Just the fact that all of these family members were so happy and eager to be there after them only knowing each other for 2 weeks. At least in my family, I know that my parents would not be so overwhelmingly supportive of that, but
also the magical spells, slightly unrealistic.
Small detail.
Small detail. So finally, can you tell everyone who's listening where they can find out more about you?
I am online. I spend a lot of time on Facebook and Instagram at Liv Lyszyk Photography. If you need help spelling it, it's Liv as in short for Olivia, not Elizabeth, and then Lyszzyk Photography.
Well, thank you, Liv.
Thanks.
The Catalyst Wedding Review podcast is a production of Catalyst Wedding Co. You can find real wedding inspiration and advice for feminists, the LGBTQ+ community, and woke folk at www.catalystwedco.com. And if you're engaged and looking for wedding vendors that share your values, then look no further than the Catalyst Vendor Directory. Also, follow us at Catalyst Wedco on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. Our theme song was composed by Momentum. Our operations manager is Marley Heilton. Our editorial team consists of Amber Marlowe, Michaela Dietz, Jordan Maney, and Cindy Savage. Our co-founders are Liz Susong, and Carly Romeo. Our intern is Sydney Zwick. Our advertising and sponsorship team consists of Katie Wannon and Erica Swift. For advertising or sponsorship inquiries, email sales@catalystwedco.com. As always, I am Jen Smacco, the CEO of Catalyst Wedding Co., and I am always open to hearing your thoughts. Send your ideas, reflections, and comments to jen@catalystwedco.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great week disrupting the wedding industry.